Well, let me start with the fact that it was a surprise to us. The Bears actually, yesterday, we completed more than 3 hours, my team did, of discussions with the Bears. Very positive discussions, and indeed mostly agreed on a bill that would move forward this morning. But they asked us not to move forward with it this morning because they said they wanted to tweak a couple of items in the bill, which were things that we were working with them on. And so to have a statement put out by the Bears, now they're saying to us that that statement is not some confirmation that they're moving to Indiana, but rather that Indiana had asked them to say that, you know, they're going to move forward with the negotiations in Indiana. But I have to say it's very disappointing to hear that they would put that statement out but not say anything about the advancement that's been made in the state of Illinois. But, you know, we're waiting to hear from the Bears what they'd like to do next.
And that sound coming in was the governor of the state of Illinois, J.B. Pritzker, who had some words after the Chicago Bears and the state of Indiana all released statements that the project is moving forward in Wolf Lake, Northwest Indiana, in Hammond. And we are here to break down the crazy week that was the Chicago Bears stadium drama with the state of Illinois and the state of Indiana here on the Sports Cubicle on WCPT 820 AM, HeartlandSignal.com, WSBC 1240 AM Chicago, and on YouTube at the Sports Cubicle. I'm your host, Mike Mercado, with the one and only Paul Shivari. And Paulie, it was a very emotional turmoil week full of drama and frustration for a lot of Bears fans, for a lot of states citizens that are going to be voting, worrying about where their taxes are going. And we got a lot of new information and yet not a whole lot of actual movement to shovels to dirt. But we're going to break this all down. And a quick shout out to the producer of the Sports Cubicle, Paul Shivari, who, you know, we know if you've been listening to us for years, we know that he is a diehard Raiders fan, but he went down the rabbit hole and really gathered some great information, built us a timeline of kind of how this story has been developing. So before we get into all that, Paulie, how did you get this kind of together? There was a lot of moving parts to kind of get this timeline as clean as you've been able to get it over the last few days.
Well, it was funny because all of it kind of came in on Thursday, you know, like leading up to it on Tuesday. You know, we had talked about, let's keep an eye on it. We knew that Indiana was possibly going to push something through committee. We knew Iowa was talking about pushing something through committee. We had a feeling Illinois was going to push something through committee. And it all was kind of timing where, like, okay, this Thursday is when their committees are probably going to be looking at it. So leading up to Thursday, it was kind of like, well, let's wait and see approach that we've got here. And then it was the morning of, we're all kind of communicating with each other, which shout out to Rich Eberwine from the digital staff. We deputized him to help us with this, and he's been really helpful with kind of telling us what's going on. And he showed us the Adam Hogue tweet that said that the Illinois Revenue Committee was canceled. And then after that, it was like the Ways and Means Committee in Indiana voted, and it was unanimous. You know, and then meanwhile, Iowa's just Iowa, and we'll get to that in a moment. But it was just kind of, this is that next step, that next hurdle, with the very least of governments are getting serious about luring the Bears to the point where maybe now at least in Indiana dollars could be put towards it. But we're still not there yet. We know the Bears need a stadium. We know like that lease with Soldier Field is eventually going to run out. Soldier Field is just going to be inadequate in terms of what a major market team like the Bears need to do. They own land in Arlington Heights. Taxes are an issue in Illinois. And Indiana seems ready to go and right there in the Chicagoland area. So with all of that bubbling, I thought, well, I guess it's time that I cover the Bears now. So,
and it was a great job that putting this together. And I think it's important that you keep it that you bring up is this is still ever developing. It will continue to be ever developing. This isn't going to be done in a week. In 5 days, there is still going to be a lot of stuff that goes on. So, Paulie, why don't we go down some of this timeline really fast for the people who have been just drowned with so much information, right? So the Indiana House Ways and Means Committee voted unanimously 24-0 this past Thursday to send SB Bill 27 to the House floor. The Indiana House of Representatives legislative session ends Friday, February 27th. this bill would allow for the creation of the Northwest Indiana Stadium Authority, which would administer construction oversight and state financing responsibilities with the stadium. The proposed site is in Hammond, Indiana, near Wolf Lake. The mayor of Hammond, Thomas McDermott, and governor of Indiana, Mike Braun, are in support of the project. On the same day, the Illinois House Revenue and Finance Committee canceled their meeting, like Paulie mentioned. The Bears mega project bill was later reported to not be part of the session agenda after initially being scheduled. Bears released a statement on Indiana governor and the Hammond location, and then the audio you heard coming into the segment from Governor Pritzker. So let's stop there for just a second, Paulie, because there are some things I want to break down from this part of the timeline. And it first starts with how serious Indiana, the state of Indiana, Northwest Indiana, were to getting this done. Again, we're nothing's been through the finish line, nothing's past the goal line, but unlike the state of Illinois, and this isn't pro-Democrat or pro-Republican, the state of Illinois has been dragging their feet when it comes to this situation. The Bears for years have been trying to communicate, trying to get some committee, trying to get something passed to get this project going, and Illinois has not done that. At one point, Governor Pritzker even said, or at least Kevin Warren was quoted in saying JB had mentioned that the Bears were not even going to be on the docket in 2026. So I understand the frustration from the Chicago Bears saying, if you don't want to talk to us or you don't want to make this official, we'll go talk to somebody who will. Are you surprised how serious Indiana were in this process? And are you surprised at all that the state of Illinois hasn't been willing to even put a committee to make a vote to make this push through for the Chicago Bears new stadium?
I'm not surprised about Indiana's commitment because this goes back to like the 90s that Northwest Indiana, you think about the long need for another Bears stadium and the long need for a third airport in Chicago. So Northwest Indiana has always kind of stepped in there and been, a place that could be developed. And of course, we know, post-war Gary, before kind of the economic collapse of that area, a little bit more of a thriving area. So there is money to be made, I think, in the Northwest Indiana region, and bringing in a major market team like that kind of legitimizes the stuff that you already have going, like the casinos and stuff. And while it might not be a pretty look having a stadium next to an oil refinery, at the very least, you've got a very working class feel going on with Chicago anyway, so it wouldn't be so hard to imagine them in Hammond. Meanwhile, Illinois, though, we got to realize that it looks like by this going through, already going through, I think, the Senate in Indiana back in January, and now making its way to the House floor, and all of the overwhelming support that we see for it, the Bears are further along with Arlington Heights than they are with Hammond, merely for the fact, and I'm assuming that the Bears have done their due diligence on environmental impact studies, on the land that they own. We got to keep in mind, they own the land in Arlington Heights. And regardless of them getting a sweetheart deal from the state of Indiana, they don't have the control of the land ownership like they do right now with Arlington Heights. So we don't know what's going on with the Wolf Lake property, where it's going to be, what it's going to look like, what the environmental impact is going to be. Whereas I'm assuming we already know that in Arlington Heights. And
that's the interesting thing about this is, let's say, and you bring up great examples that we'll get to at the very end of this, but stadiums that have almost gotten to the end of the deal, right at the goal line, they're about to do construction, and because of environmental things or location, stuff has happened. And you mentioned here, and we'll get into it, teams from the Rams all the way to the Raiders. But that includes the New England Patriots right before the dynasty in Foxborough. They were about to go to, I believe, New Haven or up in Hartford, Connecticut. And because of environmental issues, they weren't able to do that. But I want to get into this list, Paulie, continue on it, because we're up against it, and this is really good stuff. Meanwhile, the Hammond site, 1, undefined what the parcel of land would be. 2, not known what impact studies have been conducted. 3, was one of the several proposed sites in Northwest Indiana. Why this one? This is a good question by you. 3, public funding has yet to be known. 4, no architectural renderings or designer known. Bears would commit to building stadium for $2 billion, so they're willing.
And they've been, no matter where they go, they've been willing to buy the stadium and build that. But they want tax incentives and things to help them along.
The thing with Arlington Heights for the longest time,
and infrastructure. They want infrastructure.
We haven't even talked about how the Skyway is going to play into this, how all that plays into this. But what are Illinois' chances? Arlington Heights still has the competitive edge, which if we were betting, I would say they're the minus 110 favorite right now.
Yeah,
It's a lot
yeah.
closer than it was, but they're still the favorite. Edge of the Bears owning the vast amount of land, the ability to build an entertainment business district, the proximity to rail, highway, transportation, and the due diligence impact studies done. The state and the team are trying to work out a public funding deal for the infrastructure to go along with the team's agreement to spend $2 billion on the stadium's construction. The state's alleged contribution is estimated to be $855 million, so nearly $900 million. The team is also asking for a tax incentive. But then there's Iowa. The Iowa Senate Local Government Committee approved Senate File 2373, which would incentivize the building of a stadium to attract a National Football League franchise. What's next? Indiana House needs to debate, vote, and pass the bill. The governor needs to sign it. To create a Northwest Indiana Stadium Authority, public state funding agreement needs to be finalized. Illinois needs to pass bill through House committee, then debate, vote in House, and send the bill to the Senate. Iowa needs to debate, vote on the Senate floor, send the bill to the House, and eventually the governor. Governor Kim Reynolds is a lame duck, not seeking re-election in 2026, but is supportive of the, quote, wild pass and hopes to complete it. And Paulie, you brought this up for everybody, for our fans who and friends who are listening that don't know this. Examples of stadium authority that didn't have immediate success. Maryland legislator created a stadium authority in the wake of the Colts leaving. It took 10 years to relocate a team to Baltimore. An example of a failed stadium authority, the St. Louis after the Rams left.
Yeah, trying to figure out the Edward Jones Dome, what they were going to do with it.
And the process of building the stadium in Nevada.
And the reason why I chose that,
Yeah.
just recency and the fact that I think the Bears have already employed Manica
Yes.
to be the designer, and Manica did Allegiant Stadium as well. So I just figured at least, we know an example, and I printed that out for you from the Las Vegas Review Journal or Journal Review, the timeline of all the different things. Now, it's a little bit different because Nevada was kind of clamoring for a team in Las Vegas, and Las Vegas was kind of like a boom town sort of operation, trying to start bringing in major league stuff like the Vegas Golden Knights hockey team, then the Raiders, now the A's for baseball. So I just figured that that's just an example, at least, of Manica can work with somebody very quick to get something done, and what a stadium authority does. Just to give everyone an idea, because I think yesterday a lot of people saw that vote, the overwhelming majority in Indiana, and thought, well, it's official, the Bears are going to Indiana. But we're still in that process where, everyone knows the Bears are leveraging Indiana against what they can do with Illinois and Arlington Heights. And you heard J.B. Pritzker at the top there talk about how disappointed he was, and how, that's interesting that they didn't mention how close we are together. And I don't know if that's posturing by JB. I don't think he has to do that. I don't think that's an issue with him, even in an election year, whether or not the Bears stay in Illinois or not. I don't think he wants the tax burden, but I think everybody wants the Bears to stay in Illinois. From Decatur to Chicago to wherever it goes next, they're an Illinois team.
This is your charter franchise. This is a team that finally made the playoffs. There's some hope. There's a fan base that is ravenous to see a winner, and it's a chance to build a cathedral in the modern NFL that is the king of the United States when it comes to the entertainment capital that we have. And it's a chance to really take advantage of it. This is the only thing that I'll leave it on.
But I do want to say this, though. Hammond is just as worthy as Chicago as far as charter NFL franchises, because the Hammond Pros, despite not playing their home games in Hammond, they were a traveling team based out of Hammond in 1920.
And I think what's even, we're talking about geographically on top of it, 19 miles compared to 21 miles. So technically speaking, and a lot of people who live in that area of Wolf Lake and Hammond consider themselves to be a suburb of Chicago.
Yep.
And that is not even just us posturing, like that is what they believe. A lot of them believe that.
Yeah.
So, but here are
just like the New Jersey with the Meadowlands.
Exactly. Now, I will leave it on this. All right. If you're looking for reasons to be optimistic, there is no confirmation. You heard it from the governor, and you haven't seen any commitment from the Bears officially. These are the things you got to look out for. Never forget why the Chicago Bears, the McCaskies, brought in Kevin Warren. Was for this exact reason. Never forget the politicians that you're dealing with in the state of Illinois and the state of Indiana. But do not lose track in the fact that this is the NFL and they have a big hand on this. And they will make sure a deal gets done for the Chicago Bears to have the best stadium for the fans and the experience and everything the NFL has to go for them. The question is now for the state of Illinois and the Chicago Bears, is there too much bad blood? Or are they all willing to agree that this is just posturing and negotiations? If that's the case, the Chicago Bears still have a good chance of playing and being the pride of Illinois. Paulie, this was a lot of fun, and it's a story that we will continue to cover right here on the Sports Cubicle. Amazing work, great producer, and great at doing this investigation. So love you, brother. Great job. We got still a jam-packed edition of the Sports Cubicle. Rich Eberwein is here to talk all things Chicago Cubs and so much more fun. But we will be covering the Chicago Bears Stadium story as it continues to develop here on the Sports Cubicle on WCPT 820 AM, HeartlandSignal.com, WSBC 1240 AM Chicago, and on YouTube at the Sports Cubicle. He's Paul Shivari. I'm Mike Mercado.